From 1999 to 2010, Dubai was on a record-setting winning streak. In this time, the once small trading village made headlines with the world's tallest hotel, fantastically shaped artificial islands in the Persian Gulf, and then finally in 2010, the world's tallest building. For Dubai, topping charts wasn't an accident, but rather part of a meticulous, multi-generational plan for the former port town and petrostate to become a global destination of commerce and tourism. But in creating a world-class skyline, the Sheikhs of Dubai might have overlooked some of the most important aspects in what makes a city great. Behind the glass towers and indoor ski resorts is a question looming about the city. Will it stand the test of time? Let's look at Dubai, its transition into a super city, and the issues it's facing in pursuit of worldwide stardom. Before we start, like and subscribe and come with me on the next adventure. Dubai is synonymous with expensive condos, flashy cars, and just over there, one of the best skylines in the world. But not that long ago, this was a trading port town virtually unknown outside of the Middle East. Although archaeological finds trace a human presence in Dubai as far back as 5,000 years, the establishment of a town at the current location of the city is thought to originate in the early 1800s around its fort when it entered a maritime truce with Great Britain, getting protection in exchange for allyship. Dubai was a busy port serving both British ships and local vessels traveling around the Persian Gulf, as well as being a significant pearl exporter. After devastating fires in the late 1800s, Sheikh Maktoum bin Hishar Al Maktoum prioritized establishing Dubai as a trading and economic hub. In 1901, he declared Dubai's port as a free trade zone with no tax on imports or exports and gave free parcels of land to Emirati merchants. Although significantly impacted by the Great Depression and the death of the pearl industry, Dubai continued to be a growing port city over the next few decades. In a lot of ways, Dubai is an unlikely spot for a world city. June through September track average highs over 100 degrees, and there's almost no natural vegetation or fresh water here. The city receives less than 4 inches of rain a year, significantly less than many of America's water-troubled cities. The one saving factor in terms of topography is the Persian Gulf. This provided water access that enabled the town's development, and the historic center of Dubai built up around the port on Dubai Creek. The shore would also play a significant role in Dubai's 21st century boom. Following the death of his father in 1958, Rashid bin Saeed Al Maktoum became the ruler of the Emirate of Dubai and later the Prime Minister of the UAE, holding both positions until his death in 1990. Rashid modernized his forefathers' goal of attracting business to Dubai and used trading revenues from the port to build infrastructure, including the Emirates' first hotel and airport. Contrary to what you might assume, oil was not discovered in Dubai until 1966, and neighboring Emirate Abu Dhabi has far larger and earlier discovered reserves. Nevertheless, the Emirates' oil revenues enabled Sheikh Rashid to put his plans for modernizing and growing the city into overdrive in a way that would have been impossible otherwise. The UAE has also done well to garner favor with international powers. Beyond the long-standing relationship with Britain, the Emirate shares a military defense agreement with the US and France. Rashid was determined to break Dubai into the world city stage and viewed oil dependence as a future plague for Gulf nations. He envisioned a city of business, tourism, and retail that would endure beyond the eventual end of oil wealth. His reign oversaw a massive investment in infrastructure, including the construction of 2 new ports and the dredging of Dubai Creek, as well as a tunnel and the Emirates' first real skyscraper, the 1979 Dubai World Trade Center. This high-rise building was located on a newly built road 3 miles outside the central city on the periphery, a development pattern that defines Dubai to this day. By the 1980s, Dubai had a slew of modern buildings along Dubai Creek, as well as the semi-suburban growing skyline to the west. His city, however, had not exactly become a global destination. And this is where Dubai's urban planning, or lack thereof, really first started to show. After the death of Rashid in 1990, his son Sheikh Maktoum bin Rashid Al Maktoum became the Emirates' leader. Dubai is a constitutional monarchy where right to power is essentially hereditary. And unlike most Western nations, rulers are given immense power to invest as they see fit to benefit the emirate and the country, even in for-profit ventures. The state can and does own entire companies, a circumstance Maktoum would use to his advantage. He brought high-end development to the Gulf City under a blanket of both personal and state-owned investment companies, including luxury hotels along the Gulf shoreline. I like to think New Dubai was born in 1999 with the opening of the Burj Al Arab, the iconic sail-shaped hotel located on a man-made island off the coast. This hotel, built and owned by the state-run Jumeirah Hotel Group, was in itself a publicity stunt, a wild creation aimed straight at wealthy globetrotters. A legal change in 2002 kicked development into overdrive. Before this, foreigners could not own property in the emirate. For a city determined to be a global destination for the rich, this change was a must. This also happened to be at the rise of the early 2000s global real estate and financial boom that would ultimately crash in 2008, and global banks were eager to lend money in a burgeoning new international property market. This single change kicked off a massive new construction projects, and the concept of Dubai as a global player was manifesting in the world's eyes. Among the most iconic developments in this period were several clusters of artificial islands off of the natural coast, probably most noteworthy because none of them are necessary. Unlike Singapore or the Netherlands, Dubai has thousands of acres of empty land to build on, and there's no practical need for adding more. But then again, practicality wasn't the goal. These were developed by the state-owned Nikhil Real Estate Company, yet another flashy state-sponsored publicity stunt, with expansive houses lining the artificial palm fronds destined for international buyers. Palm Jumeirah is the only fully developed of the island clusters and is practically a city within itself. There's also the nearly identical and slightly larger Palm Jebel Ali in the world, both of which halted construction in the 2008 market crash. A small number of the world's islands have been developed, but most of them, as well as the entirety of Jebel Ali, never resumed construction and has been sitting empty for nearly 2 decades. On the mainland, other developments like Dubai Marina and downtown Dubai created new sub-cities in the same period. And for urbanism, Dubai's problems started magnifying. The generations of sheiks had ideas about what they wanted in Dubai, but they didn't quite know what they wanted Dubai to be. Despite immense state control, development was listless and not working to create a great cohesive city. Beyond the historic center, more on that one in a second, the entirety of New Dubai is built around the car. The hotels and resorts are intended to be driven to and driven from, and with the exception of the immediate grounds, you're not meant to stroll. The Dubai skyline stretches off and on for 25 miles along Sheikh Zayed Road, nearly all car dependent, with decent walkability limited to individual developments. Al Maktoum set his vision for modern Dubai in the 1960s, and in a lot of ways, it has since been based on a 1960s suburban American development model. The overall skyline of Dubai is split into several clusters of super tall modern towers. The big ones are Dubai Marina and the downtown Dubai/Sheikh Zayed Road skylines, each of which could pass for a city within themselves. Beyond that, there are an ever-growing number of micro skylines mostly concentrated to master developments, none of which bear any significance to the historic center of the city. Now, this concept alone isn't necessarily weird. European cities followed much of the same concept, locating a modern skyline outside of the historic center of the city. Paris and London did almost exactly the same thing with La Défense and Canary Wharf. But unlike Paris and London, Dubai intends their peripheral skylines to be the attraction, and its plan to become a world city all but ignored the historic center. Dubai Marina, my favorite of these developments, is a full 16 miles from the historic center of Dubai and 25 miles from the northern end of Al Sharjah's skyline. Even in the intentionally laid out Palm Jumeirah, the major public space of the trunk island is effectively a freeway. Beyond the master planned internally focused developments, things get even more chaotic. There's practically no concept of a streetscape in most of Dubai. Most of the intervening space between the urban zones is sprawling, low-density development with mid- and high-rise buildings following major roads and freeways. But even in dense, non-master planned areas, there's usually no vegetation on the streets. The buildings are defined by beige concrete, and where storefronts are present, they usually leave a lot to be desired. And because Dubai developed so quickly, and did so during the recent past, there's also a lot to be desired architecturally. Here's a comparably dense neighborhood in Paris. Note the architectural details, charismatic street life, and appealing storefronts and open space. This is the boat Dubai missed. Okay, now on to the historic center of the city. Dubai has a large and very interesting historic district along Dubai Creek. There's a fort from the 1700s that's now the Dubai Museum, and the awesome Bastakia Quarter, with narrow pedestrian alleyways dating back to the 1800s. Okay, side note here. Half of the Bastakia Quarter was demolished to build a government office complex in the 80s. Despite moves like this, Dubai still maintains a great historic center. Other cities, even my nearby San Antonio, have used places like this to create awesome new old tourist districts that embrace the past and are centered around pedestrians. That concept is largely non-existent here. Yes, this is still an important part of Dubai, but the focus of the Sheikh's efforts were outside of the old city. The attraction of modern Dubai exists as a set of peripheral landing places that totally bypass the city's roots. At the Burj Al Arab, you can't even tell you're in the same place. Now, there is some progress here. The Al Seef development fronting the creek mimics the local historic architecture in a whimsical way in what should be a template for the rest of modern Dubai. There's also the Heritage Village that recreates early life in the emirate and the rest of the historic waterfront with the old abras, water taxis, now serving as a tourist attraction. The three sheikhs who built modern Dubai were great at focusing on the spectacle. The Burj Al Arab is a spectacle, so is Dubai Mall, the Palm Islands, and even Dubai Marina. But what was not planned was what all of these spectacles would make together. Dubai has no real urban identity beyond luxury and excess, but it should. This is a city with a fascinating history and the resources to reimagine what a 21st century Arabic city could be. At the end of the day, what we think of as Dubai is a city built on a 1960s suburban American framework with freeways, parking garages, and just the occasional glimpse of urbanism. In the short term, Dubai's experiment seems to have worked. It consistently lists on the top 10 tourist destinations in the world, but in its competition lies an important trend. Nearly all of the top destinations are relatively dense historic cities with robust street life. Even in notoriously car-based places like LA and Las Vegas, tourism generally centers on a few walkable areas where you leave your car and engage with the city. That's what Dubai is missing. There's no West Village or Champs-Élysées here, and the worst part is, Dubai had every opportunity to become this. Now off my soapbox, places like Cancun and much of South Florida have become global destinations on the same framework as Dubai. So it's not out of the realm of possibility for Dubai to continue business as usual and have everything work out fine. But is that what Dubai should be going for? Now, I don't want to minimize the huge accomplishment modern Dubai is. Despite my criticisms, this city has truly developed global renown amid an inhospitable environment and has built a skyline that rivals New York or Chicago in only a couple of decades. For architects and the like, Dubai is one of the few places on earth where dreams can come true. The construction projects here are on a scale unimaginable in most of the world. Forget buildings, here you can build a whole city or even a new island. The good news for Dubai is that a more urban-focused framework wouldn't be that hard to implement. Places like Dubai Marina and downtown Dubai already attempt to create a Chicago-esque riverfront, and despite notorious car dependency, the city already operates an extensive network of elevated trains and buses. The extent of state power in Dubai means that changes can happen quickly, so whether or not Dubai currently meets the profile of a great city, it has the opportunity. So what will Dubai be like in 20 years? Will it forever be a suburban global oasis, or will it have to change to keep its edge? Let me know in the comments. If you've ever been to Dubai, let me know what it was like. As always, thank you for watching. Subscribe to the channel and come with me on the next adventure.